Alright, so we're looking at distance formula. Now, 2 weeks ago, we did length, right? So, this is kind of what we did here, number one. If I have two coordinates, 7 and 2, determine the distance. Well, here is 2, and here is 7. Oop, that's 6. Here's 7. How did we find the length from 2 to 7? How did I find the length here? Yeah, subtracted them, right? So I took the absolute value, and again you can take 2 minus 7, 7 minus 2, doesn't matter. We get 5, and the absolute value of 5 is 5. Remember, it's always positive, right? Distance is always going to be positive. So 5. The other way I could find this was by counting. If I started here at 2, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this distance here is 5. Okay? So that's what we did 2 weeks ago. So now we're going to transition into graphs, okay, and actual points. Okay? So remember, your point is given as an x and a y value. So your x's go left and right, your y's are going up and down. So if I look here, I have 1, 5. So 1, 5. There's my first point, 1, 5. And then I have 4, 5. So 4, 5. Here's my second point. And now I can find this distance between the two. Okay? Now, when we have problems like this, this is really no different than what I just had up here. Okay? So if I have a graph, you can see it follows the grid lines. This y value is the same. Okay? I'm basically just finding well, what's the distance from 1 to 4? And again, I can count it if I want. 1, 2, 3. So this distance here is equal to 3. So that's pretty easy, right? Just count. These y values are both 5. So when I have my y values being the same value, same number, or like in number 3, you can see my x values are the same, 2 and 2. So 2 and 2, okay? I'm going to be able to count this as well. So I can plot these 2 points, 2, negative 1, so 2, negative 1, and 2, 3, 2, 3. Again, when I connect these 2 points, I'm following that grid line, okay? Again, I can just count those. So right here on my line, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here my distance is equal to 4. Okay. So those are the 2 easy ones. If I have same value for an x or same value for a y, I'm just finding that distance between the other value. Okay. Or if it follows the grid lines on my picture, I can just count them. Okay. So this is kind of what we're going to get into this week, though. This is a little bit more a little harder. Okay. So I have these 2 points, 1, 2, and 2, 5. So 1, 2. Let's put that on my graph. 1, 2 is here. So that's 1, 2. 2, 5. So 2, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's my 2, 5. And again, if I connect these 2 points, you can see they don't follow the grid lines, right? So how are we going to calculate this? Well, we're going to use the distance formula. So distance formula is this. It's the square root of my x's being subtracted, so x2 minus x1 plus my y values, y2 minus y1 squared. Okay? So that is my distance formula. the difference in my x's squared plus the difference in my y squared. Okay? So to use this formula, you need to follow some basic steps. Okay? First step is just to write it out without x's and y's in it. Like that. Okay? So you have the outline of my distance formula. So I have an outline of my distance formula. What I'm going to do now is take my points and plug them in. What you notice is whatever point I pick first needs to be first in both sets of parentheses, x and y. Same thing second. Okay? So this is what I like. I like for you to have this set up so I can take 1 point, 1, 2, and I'm going to plug it in the front of both sets of parentheses. Then I'm going to take my second point, 2, 5, and plug it in the back of the parentheses. Okay? So you can see it real nice and neat there, color coded. 1, 2 in the fronts, 2 5s in the back. Now, to solve this, okay, you can't type this entire thing in your calculator and get an answer. So we're going to split it up, and basically I'm going to give you 2 steps. Okay? So once you write it out, you're going to take this part under the square root, all the parentheses squared plus the parentheses squared, and that's what you're plugging in your calculator. So you're going to plug it in just like you see it. Parentheses 1 minus 2 parentheses squared plus parentheses 2 minus 5 parentheses squared. Now remember, these little squares, okay, so the squares, there's an X2 button, right? So that's what you use in there. And we're going to get one number. So you should get, hopefully everybody got a 10. Okay? Hopefully you got a 10. Alright, so we get square root of 10. Okay? And your last step is the square root. So square root, to get this square root, you're going to hit the second button, and then you're going to hit the x squared button. Okay? And right above the x squared button on your calculator, I think it's red, you can see the square root. So you're going to hit second x squared, type in 10, hit enter, and you get 3.1622. 3.1622. Now, most of these are going to be decimals. It's okay. We're going to round them. We're going to keep 2 numbers after the decimal. Okay? So that's the hundredths place. So we're going to look here at our third number, and we're going to round the 6. So does the 6 stay a 6, or does the 6 go up to 7? Stays the same. So we're going to say it's about 3.16 in distance, and that's our answer. Okay? So write it out, fill in your numbers, calculate the inside of the square roots, then square root to get our answer. Okay? So we're going to do one more together. So let's try number 5 together here. It says use the distance formula to find the distance between 517 and -5, -3. Okay? So fill out our distance bracket here. So I have my parentheses squared, and it's subtraction. Okay? So again, I'm going to take this first number here, plug it into the front. Okay, my first point. So 517, so 517. I'm going to take my second point, second coordinate, plug it into the back. Now, here's where I like you to write it out first, okay? Because if I had, let's say I have 3 minus -5. minus negative is actually what? Yeah, minus negative is actually addition. Okay? So I like you to have this wrote out, so now when I'm taking these negatives and I'm putting them in the back, I can change my sign to addition right away. So negative 5, so negative 5, the two negatives made that positive, right? Negative 3. And now I don't have double signs. I don't have to worry about changing signs because I changed them right when I put the point in. Okay, does that make sense? So now that I have the numbers plugged in, now I can just plug this straight into my calculator here. Again, exactly like I see it. And you do get 500. Okay, so keep plugging it in. Hopefully, check it, double check it, make sure you get 500. So square root of 500 then, 22.360. So again, you can round that, keep the 6 the same, so 22.36 is my answer, okay? Alright, you guys are going to try number 6, okay? So again, start with your start with your formula, square roots, right? Parentheses squared plus parentheses squared, subtraction inside. Plug your numbers in, calculate the inside of the square root, then square root, get your answer. Let's start plugging some numbers in here. So negative 2, negative 7, so negative 2, negative 7, and negative 8, negative 1, negative 8, negative 1, those will become positives. So hopefully you have something that looks similar to this. Again, negative 8 and negative 2 need to be together, negative 1, negative 7 need to be together, okay? And those order does matter, okay? So whatever point you start with, make sure it's in the front of both, back points in the back, okay? So remember, plug in this. So that part right there gives me 72, okay? So I have square root 72, okay? And then when I square root that, gives me 8.45, 8.485. Again, if I'm looking to round, okay, this 5, does the 8 stay in 8 or does it go up to 9? Yep, rounds up to 9, so we have 8.49 as our final answer, okay? Now, with that being said, MathXL is going to tell you to round to a certain value, okay? Probably the hundredth place. If you don't round to that exact value, it's going to mark it wrong, okay? So again, this is where it's beneficial for you, especially on the test, to write your workout, okay? If you put in there 8.48, it will count it wrong, and you'll miss. This probably is going to be 3 or 4 points, okay? Now, if you get it wrong, and you have your work, and I look at your work, and I notice, oh, you just didn't round it correctly, you'll probably maybe miss half a point, okay? So you get like 3.5 out of the 4 points, okay? Maybe if I'm feeling real generous that day, I might just give you all 4 points, okay? Because you actually do it. Does that make sense? So it's beneficial to write that work down, okay? All right. All right, take a look at this. What if I'm given a graph? Well, there's a couple ways you can do this. Well, I have points here given, right? So I could find these values, these points, negative 2, 4, and I have a point down here, 6, negative 4. So I could take those 2 points now and plug them into my formula and get my answer, okay? But there's an easier way, and I'm all about easier ways, so I don't have to do all the work, okay? So again, if I'm looking at my distance formula, this part right here, okay, this x's, it's the difference between the x values and the difference between the y values. So basically, how far left and right do I go? How far up and down do I go? Okay? So I'm just going to take this, and again, if I follow grid lines, I can count. And I'm going to go straight over until my pencil lines up with the other point, and then I'm going to go straight up or straight down. I'm going to make a triangle. Okay?
Does the second x have to come before the first x?
No. As long as these two are in the same spot.
So it could be the other one.
You can flip, yeah.
Alright.
Okay. As long as the same point is in the front or the back. Okay. So all I'm doing now, and basically this is what my formula is going to look like now. Distance equals square root some number squared plus some number squared. And those numbers are going to be here. It doesn't matter which one is which. I need to calculate those two distances now. Okay? So if I count, and again, each big line here is 2, so 2, 4, 6, 8. Count 2, 4, 6, 8. So they just happen to be the same. They won't always be the same. So these two numbers now that I just counted are what numbers get squared. So really I have square root 8 squared plus 8 squared. Okay? Just looking at that difference. So how far left and right, how far up and down. Okay? And now this is what I'm going to plug in my calculator here. Okay? Again, if you want to do it in 2 steps, you can do that inside first. You don't have to worry about parentheses then. So 8 squared plus 8 squared, that's 128. And then square roots of 128 gives me 11.31 when I round it. And there's my answer. Okay? So last example, well, word problem says in a city, the odd number of streets run north and south, even numbered streets run east and west. Each block is a quarter mile long. How far would you walk to get from the corner of 2nd and 3rd to the corner of 1st and 8th? So we have different streets in here, right? So north and south are even numbers. So from 2 to 8, so here's 2nd Street, and here's, sorry, I did that wrong. North and south. North and south, 2nd and 8th. Okay, north and south. East and west then run odd streets, so 1st and 3rd. They want to know from the corner of 2nd and 3rd to the corner of 1st and 8th. Corner of 2nd and 3rd to the corner of 1st and 8th. What is that distance there? Okay? Now, from 1st to 3rd, how many streets are there in between? 2, right? So this distance here is 2, right? What about 2nd to 8th. From 2nd to 8th, how many streets are in there? 2nd, so we got 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, so 6. Okay, good. So you just subtract them. So those again are my two values that I'm looking at. So this is our picture. Just like our graph picture, we can use kind of a shorter method here. So square root some number squared plus another number squared. What are those two numbers? 2 and 6, right? So 2 and 6, so 2 squared plus 6 squared. So let's plug that in our calculator. 2 squared plus 6 squared. And what do we end up with? What? 40. Should be 40. So 6 squared is 36, 2 squared is 4. So that gives me 40. Now, what is the square root of 40 then? 6.32. And again, if I keep going, 4, 5, 5, right? Okay, and it keeps on going. Now, each block is a quarter mile long. So what we found was 6.322 blocks, right? Because we took our measurements in blocks. Does that make sense? So this is the distance in blocks. How can I convert that to actual distance? Each block is how much? 1/10 of a mile. So how can I calculate that? Careful. Multiply it by 1/10. Okay? So yeah, it's kind of like divided. Yeah. So whatever that distance given is, I'm going to multiply it. Okay? I just don't want you to get confused and say, I'm going to divide it all the time. Okay? So whatever that distance was, I'm multiplying. So I'm going to take this 6.32, and again, you don't have to round it. You have a calculator, right? So just take that times 1/10. Okay? So in your calculator, just hit times 1/10. And what happens? I get 0.6324, right? So this is now in miles. So 0, again, if I want to round it, 0.63 miles. Okay, 0.63 miles. So that is our actual distance diagonally here. Okay, what would the walking distance be? What would the walking distance look like?
6.82 blocks.
Well, 6, if I walk, because again, if I walk, I have to walk following the streets, right? I can't just walk through buildings. So I'd walk up 2 blocks and over 6 blocks. So it would really be 8 blocks, right? And if I take that 8 blocks times my 1/10, yes, it would be 0.8. Good. So 0.8, and that would be miles. Okay. All right. Distance formula.